Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Graham Elwood. You're watching The Political Vigilante. I want to welcome to the show John Updike, president of Open Primaries. And how you doing, man?
Good. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. We have, you and I have known each other a long time. We went to high school together, and you've been working in independent politics for, 30 years now?
Yeah.
And you're a person, we've always had really great political discussions, even debates. And I give you credit to, I've always been leery of the two-party system, but you've helped me really open my eyes to how corrupt both parties are. I mean, and you've steered me in that direction, for a while. And it's, some of that has even helped inform this show. And, I've done work for, and full disclosure to the audience, I've been paid to direct some commercials and PSAs for open primaries on specific ballot measures around the country, which I'm happy to be a part of that. That's like, I love doing work like that. But just so people know, like I'm fully on board with open primaries, and what you're doing. And I'm registered to vote in a state that has open primaries. California has a top 2 system. But before we get into the open primary thing, I really wanted to have you on the show because the state of the left right now is pretty much in disarray. I mean, Bernie Sanders helped unify a lot of people. He woke a lot of people up. There's a lot of especially younger people, or even people in their 30s or up who like never that involved in politics. And then Bernie Sanders came around in 2015, 2016, and they got involved. And some people, that was the first time they saw how corrupt the Democratic Party is. Like, and the Republicans are just as corrupt as well. They're corrupt in different ways. But so now that the Bernie just quit, I mean, when he quit in 2020, he just, it was astounding how he just kind of stopped and said, my good friend Joe Biden, that last debate, March 15th of 2020. And so not to rehash that, but now the left, everyone's fighting with each other. Nobody can agree on anything. The vaccine and mandates have caused a big divide. So what?
I'll tell you this, Graham, it's much harder to deal with success than it is to deal with failure. And I think, the fact that you pointed out Bernie and the left, I think a conversation about the state of the left has to start with success and a certain way in which the progressive movement, broadly defined, I don't want to get into the taxonomy of this versus that or different strains of the left, but broadly defined, the left has had a huge cultural and political impact since the 1960s. And just in the last, 5-10 years. And Bernie was kind of, I think, one important expression of that in kind of, I remember the press conference Bernie did in 2015 when he got up on the steps of Congress and said, wait a minute, are we coronating Hillary Clinton? If nobody's going to run, I'll run. And I'm the wrong guy to run. I'm a socialist. Nobody listens to me. I'm in the margins of the Democratic Party. But if nobody runs, I'm running because we're supposed to live in a democracy, not kind of an oligarchy. And to his credit, he did. And he captured some lightning in a bottle, which was very significant. But my point, I think what we're dealing with now is the left, like many people, doesn't know how to deal with success. It's much easier to be marginalized and irrelevant than it is to be a powerful force in the country, because then you have to be smart. You have to be smarter.
What do you mean by being like? I get that in terms of, I don't know. I guess one thing I don't know if I'm going to push back a little because I'm trying to figure out how has the left been successful. Like it feels like we haven't won anything. Like we've gotten nothing. Like. We have the Medicare for all we can't even get Medicare for all passed in the middle of a once in 100-year pandemic. We can't, I mean, we get this, the squad gets in there and it's like, oh, finally we're going to change the Democratic Party from within, which very much reveals to me that you can't change the Democratic Party from within.
Yeah,
So
I think that if you look there, all you see is abject failure. If you look at how the United States of America and the world have transformed in some very positive ways, culturally, politically, I think there's been a lot of progress, and I think progressives can take a lot of credit for that. But it's. I don't mean to be Pollyanna here. I think I think that fundamentally, part of what we have done as a people is we've moved the ball down the court at a time when we have almost no political power. So we've been able, for example, we were able to enact felon rights restoration in Florida. And there was a coalition built. Felon rights restoration got more votes than Trump or Biden by a factor of many. It brought people together from the left and the right to do this. Now, that was this little moment when you see the American people kind of moving the ball and saying, hey, these 1990s Clintonian policies of putting everybody in jail, we're going to try to move the ball a little bit on that. You see it with medical marijuana. You see it with Medicaid expansion. You see a variety of ways that the American people are giving expression that there has been some progress. But let's be honest, Graham, the American people, I don't care who you vote for. I don't care, if you're black or white, we have almost no political power. I mean, people just look, name me an issue, and you say, well, this is what the people want, and they don't get it over and over and over and across the board. And like, what kind of impact do we have on the foreign policy of this country? Virtually none. Virtually none. What kind of impact do we have on, I don't want to get into a list, but I don't think that means that there has not been some real qualitative ways in which progressive politics has seeped into the mainstream of American political culture. Forget political culture, American culture. And that's hard to deal with, because then where do you go from here? We still live in a country where people have no political power.
Right. I mean, that's an excellent point. I will give you, I will give you credit for that. Like, no one was talking about a Green New Deal 5-6 years ago in the mainstream media. Now that's a thing that's talked about in the mainstream media. Thank God. Medicare for all wasn't mentioned and now it's at least being mentioned. And you can point to, you can point to a lot of labor strikes that have actually in the last 4 or 5 years that a lot of teachers have won in red states. I mean, we've got that Starbucks that just got unionized. And so lefties are getting progressive policies passed, but you're right. From a political standpoint, we have absolutely no power. And I think nothing more typifies this than the Squad and force the vote. Like they had power and they will not exert it. Or the Democratic caucus, that 51 members of the Democratic caucus, is almost 100 members of the Democratic caucus in Congress, voted to give Biden a $768 billion war budget. Like that's, they could have said no, they could have resisted in any number of ways, but they refused to sort of resist. But so what we obviously are, this political structure is broken in terms, like you say, the American people, we have no say because both parties are funded by big corporations and they don't care. But how do we, as whatever, lefty YouTubers or working in non-for-profit political organizations like you do, or anybody that's sort of on the streets trying to be an activist or trying to get their message across, how do we get over this fact that now we're getting into this, like lefty purity test of like the true left? I mean, I had a debate with my longtime friend, Jimmy Dore, who I've known almost as long as I've known you. And one of the things I was saying to him is, when you say who's the true left and who isn't, then you're telling that's helping to divide the left. I feel pissed off when I hear that. And then, as I said in that debate, I said, well, so if you say anti-mandate is the true left, well, I drive an electric car. Does that make me the true left if you drive a gas car? Well, you live in New York City, so you take public transportation. That makes you more of the true left than me, because from a carbon footprint standpoint, taking public transportation is better than even having an electric car. Like, my point is, where does all of this happen? And everybody, is fighting with each other. And there's a quote I heard from an indie media person that said, the right looks for recruits, the left looks for traitors. And the left tends to so easily fight with itself. And also there's a long history of the FBI and the CIA in infiltrating these movements to get people to fight with each other. So we've got to combat just human beings being human beings and fighting over stupid shit. And then people in power trying to manufacture fights on top of it. So how do we deal with that?
You're going to hate my answer, Graham. You're going to hate it. You're going to hate it. I think we have to be radically philosophical in the following sense. I think we have to ask questions amongst ourselves about, is the word left even, does it mean anything? Are those categories of understanding even helpful as someone who wants to make positive change in 21st century America? I think that we have to ask questions about what does it mean? Is the job of a progressive to talk to other progressives, or to talk to people that would not be classified as progressives? I think there is a deep methodological stupidity among the progressive movement. I count myself among it, to think that the job is to talk to other progressives and win them over. And that leads to this kind of, particularly in moments of success. Success is terrifying. People do all kinds of stupid shit when they've had success. They get into this masturbatory, stupid behavior of nitpicking this and that. But why? Why aren't you organizing people that don't fit into your neat little categories? But I don't think, I say philosophical, Graham, because I'm not trying to say, hey, adopt what I think. I think we need to ask questions, and we need to be very rigorous and challenge our own assumptions about what it means to be politically active in the 21st century. Do the same categories that were relevant during the French Revolution, should that be guiding how we're positioning ourselves? I mean, here's another thing I think I have in my opinion about this, but I think people should ask and develop their own opinions. Is government policy what we should be working to change? Is that the definition of progressivism, is changing what the United States government does? Or is it something else? Now, I don't mean to ask these as flip questions. I don't mean to think that we should, it's all about, peace and love and all that. No, but I think just the asking of the question, regardless of what the answer is there's a way in which the left, we act like the New Deal, which was created 90 years ago, is the permanent model of progressive organizing for eternity. It's like, why? That was a deal cut between the communists, the socialists, and the Democratic Party in the midst of a mass economic crisis. And the Democrats won that deal. And why do we think that's what we should hew to? I think people should ask questions about that.
I guess
I told you weren't going to like it.
Yeah.
I told you. I see the Graham, you can't hide when you disagree. You're just like, dude, give me something I can work with.
Well, just so you don't feel disappointed. Yeah. I think that's great conceptually what you just said. But the problem I have with that, and I think this is not that we shouldn't be philosophical, not that we shouldn't ask questions. We should be asking questions. I think the problem we're dealing with is who we're going up against is billionaire elites who can do whatever they want, pass whatever law, pay $0 in taxes, and fly a cock rocket around the moon while their employees are starving. So like, I don't know that we have time for sort of philosophical discussions. Not that we shouldn't have them, not that we should go to the full extreme of what's kind of currently happening, which is these are the things I believe in. If you don't agree with me 100%, then fuck you. You're not a real lefty. I don't think that where we're at right now, that's too far in the extreme of the opposite of where you're talking about. But what we are up against is a mass propaganda machine. Let's just talk about the United States. I mean, in other countries, lefty movements, lefty governments, lefty parties have a lot of power and voice. They have coalition governments. And, you know, you watch presidential or prime minister debates in these other countries, they'll have 5 people on stage, a communist, a socialist, a green member. And their right-wing party is to the left of the Democrats in most cases. I mean, like Angela Merkel, who just is stepping down or just has stepped down, she's to the left of Bernie Sanders. I mean, this is the country we're in. Is there's no, you know, as Ralph Nader has fondly said, he goes, I'd be happy. He goes, when people say we need a third party, he goes, I'd be happy with just a second one, because the differences between these two parties we have, there's 4 things. I mean, the only difference is, you know, the Republicans get money from the NRA and the Democrats get money from AIPAC. Everybody else gets the same money from the same group of Wall Street assholes. As, you know, like the Democrats use identity politics to keep people to go along with their horrific policies. And, you know, the liberals, if a person of color is dropping bombs on poor people, yay, we don't give a shit, you know. And the right wing uses the Second Amendment and, you know, family values, you know, the Bible, to get their rights taken away. And how do we get Americans to wake up to the fact that we're actually we're in class warfare right now? And they want us to believe that it's red versus blue, black versus white, whatever, you know, socialist versus capitalist, which is a little more accurate, but we're in class warfare. I mean, we have people who've, all the statistics that were pretty horrifying before the pandemic hit. 60% of the country couldn't afford a $500 to $1,000 emergency. Bankruptcy, number one cause of bankruptcy was medical debt. I mean, the opioid epidemic. I mean, that is a crisis of desperation. 90,000 people die a year from hope because there's no hope. We have suicide rates are through the roof, and all of that got exacerbated because of COVID and people losing their jobs. And then we see Trump and Biden, the Republicans and the Democrats, pass several stimulus bills that literally give trillions of dollars to Wall Street. I mean, 100 new billionaires were created while Amazon workers are getting fired because they're like, hey, I want hazard pay for packing boxes when there's a deadly virus ripping through the factory. I mean, so how do we overcome that? Because it's like,
well, here, see, I think you make a very compelling argument, Graham. Not an argument. You paint a picture of what's going on in America, the desperation, the instability, the economic disparity. The picture you paint is a picture in which there should be, forget this language, this is the wrong language. There should be progressive political clubs and organizations. There should be hundreds of them in Kansas, hundreds of them in Iowa, in the heartland where the opioid epidemic is killing millions of people. And, you know, they're not. Progressives don't go there. They don't talk to those people. They think they're stupid, dumb, idiotic people that are suckered in by professional wrestlers and Donald Trump charlatans. They have such an attitude about the American people. I mean, let me just tell you a story. I was talking with an anthropologist out of the University of Houston named Cecilia Bailly. Very interesting woman. And she was hired by the Texas Democratic Party to do a deep dive anthropological study using polling and focus groups and meetings to understand why Latino voters were not just marching into the polling booth and polling Democrat, while Donald Trump was actually increasing his vote. You know, how is that even possible? And what she found was that the Democratic Party had a whole bunch of categories for understanding voters, and voters do not fit those categories. Now, she was only looking at Latinos. She was saying these are people that like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. They support gun rights and they want better, they want single payer health care. They're pro-church and they want abortion. They want, like, you try to put these people into some category that fits your digital ad campaign. And the thing that she said, two things, that if you want to organize Latinos in an ongoing way to vote and vote for left of center candidates, you have to understand that they're independent. They don't want to be in a party. And you have to understand that your ideological categories make no sense to them. They literally make no sense. And part of what these Latino voters are saying is, no one ever talks to us. No one knocks on our door. They don't campaign to us. We never see a candidate anywhere near because we don't fit these neat little boxes. I think the progressive movement spends way too much time talking about the latest Mark Maron podcast over microbrew porters at the Bell, brew house in Brooklyn than they do actually recognizing what you're saying, Graham. This country should be an organizer's paradise for building a new people-powered movement to transform how we do things. But the progressive movement stays in Brooklyn. I don't get it. Having arguments about if you don't drive an electric car, are you a true progressive? That's called masturbation.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, that's what many of us on the those sound like neoliberals to me, but you're right. Many of them sort of identify with progressive issues, but I mean, that gets to...
What does that mean? Why do you jump to putting people in a category? What I'm describing is that the American people are a mess. They are so disorganized, all over the place, backward, forward. They're pro-gay marriage and they're racist. They're everywhere. And I think the progressive movement needs to fall in love with how just messy and incorrect and stupid and wonderful the American people are. I mean, we're a mess. But if you're going to take a purity position, like I only organize people that have already decided to be carbon neutral, then you're going to talk to your four friends.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a valid, you bring up a very valid point. I mean, Ron Placone and I mean, first of all, I've been a comedian for 30 years. I've traveled all over this country and I've seen it. And I've seen it in ways that people in Brooklyn and Hollywood they have no idea. They have no idea. People in, any of the big cities, if they've never traveled through the middle of the country, they do not know. And then Ron Placone and I did our progressive comedy tour for about a year and a half, almost 2 years before the pandemic. And we did we went through red states. We went to small towns. We did the big markets as well. And there are these very interesting sort of progressive lefties, like you say, they want to, cut the military budget in half. They want Medicare for all. And they own guns and their Second Amendment. And they, whatever, there's all these areas that overlap, that people don't make sense, that do make sense. And that is something I'd like to see. So how do we do this though? Outside of the Democratic Party, because that's where progressivism goes to die. I mean, if you're progressive, you go there to die. I mean, we can go on down the line. AOC, I was so excited. She's capitulated to them. Nina Turner, she won't leave. Paula Jean Swearengin left to go to the People's Party. That was a huge defection, and I'd love to see more of that. But it's so obvious. I mean, even just in AOC's, her first 14 months, she's calling out Nancy Pelosi. She's saying, at her freshman orientation for Congress, she's like, why are we being heard from lobby groups? There's no labor movements here. And now she's just kind of playing typical Democrat ball of blaming everything on the Republicans, even though the goddamn Democrats control the House and the Senate. Like, this is unbelievable to me. And American people, you got to get the vote any blue will do crowd is so frustrating to deal with, because they sit there and they say all Trumpers are dumb and stupid and they're closed-minded. And then they don't want to hear that Russia didn't hack the election. Hillary Clinton actually ran a horrible campaign. God forbid Hillary Clinton's ever held accountable. I mean, this is just the crazy hypocrisy that we hear on down the line. I mean, like many of these people were the Believe All Women Me Too movement. I haven't heard a peep out of them during the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, who is a pedophile and a sex trafficker who was at Chelsea Clinton's goddamn wedding. This is the problem. They think the Trumpers are hypocritical and all the time, but so are the Vote Any Blue Will Do crowd. How do we get anybody to get off of their team? They're sitting either in their red state, their red state team, because I have good friends that live in Texas, and they're like, all they hear from people in Texas is, the liberals, they blame everything on the liberals. Right. And then everybody in the blue states sit there, the fucking Trump, they blame all the Trumpers. They blame everything on the Trumpers. And it's like, it's how do we get over that?
Well, I mean, that's the $20 million question. And in some ways, I and many people have been banging our head against that wall for a long time. And I'm not going to get glib here, Graham. I mean, I see some very positive motion in that direction. I see Andrew Yang forming the Forward Party. He did something very smart. He purposefully created a third party that is not a carbon copy of some of the pre-existing third parties that have failed to get any traction, like the Green Party and the Libertarian Party. They're kind of perpetually marginalized. I think that, hey, and I'm someone who campaigned for Ralph Nader. Okay, so don't think I'm being some professor criticizing the Green Party. I think they've made huge tactical mistakes. But first of all, Graham, the largest group of voters in the country are independents. You would never know this. For example, when they do every political pundit, you watch Meet the Press, you watch this, they say, independents are 40% of the country, but really they're not independent. They're Democrat leaners and Republican leaners. So you're able to take a country in which the largest group of people say, I don't want to be on team red and team blue, and you force them using trickery of polling to associate with one team or the other. Because remember, there's only two choices on the ballot most of the time, and people who are independent have to choose one of them. And so then they use that voting choice as a way to say, well, you're just on team blue or team red. So I think there's starting to be an erosion of that, though. There's starting to be some recognition that the American people are leaving the political parties in droves. And that is happening in red states, blue states, purple states, across the country. Black people, white people, Latino people don't want to be in these parties. But then you're raising the organizing question, which is, how do you build sufficient traction, power for a political alternative? And that is the challenge. And I think that, I don't know. I think people are experimenting, have been experimenting. I was part of the Reform Party experiment. We got 20 million votes for Ross Perot and built a left-right coalition. The stories I have about the Reform Party would shock you in terms of who was at the table there. I guarantee you half the people at the table in the Reform Party 20 years later were voting for Trump, and the other half were voting for Bernie. That's who was at the table at the Reform Party. But, the two-party system is extremely flexible. They're extremely strong. It's a growth industry in America, and I don't underestimate them at all. But at the same time, they're very authoritarian because they don't deliver anymore. I mean, I don't believe this, but you could make an argument that 50 years ago, during the Eisenhower administration, the two-party system delivered some modicum of progress and services to the American people. You could make that argument. Again, I wouldn't even say it's a flawless argument, but you could make it. You cannot make that argument now, that the two-party system delivers for the American people. And it's why you see It's why you see people voting for candidates that are, I think the technical term is batshit crazy.
Yeah, these
I
candidates
mean, what
that
would you
are,
do, Graham, if you have no political power and you know the system is rigged and your voice means nothing and people don't listen to you? Why not vote for P.T. Barnum? Why not vote for the guy saying, I'm going to go to Washington and I'm going to take a shit on the rug?
Yeah. I mean, look, I totally understood. I didn't vote for Trump, and I'm glad that he's gone, because you can't undermine the, white nationalist fascism that he's really instigated. That's a dangerous thing. But I understand I don't give a shit. I'm done. I mean, in the last election, I wrote in Jesse Ventura because I could not vote for Joe Biden. I just can't vote for a war. I can't vote for either Trump or Biden. There's no way I couldn't do it. I can't do. Two guys that have rape accusations against them, two guys that have bombed the shit out of poor countries as a president and a vice president. I can't. Two guys that are rich, privileged, don't give a shit about the working class, and yet claim they do. Trump's Make America Great Again. Biden's riding the Amtrak to Delaware. Shut the fuck up. Like, I couldn't listen to either one of those idiots. And so I totally get that. I wrote in Jesse Ventura because I believed he was the best candidate. And he didn't even want to run. People were begging him to run and he wouldn't run. And I still wrote him in. I mean, there was people who watch my show that wrote me in because I would be a better president than these idiots, which is true, which is not saying much. And so, yeah, it is so broken. I don't know how it gets fixed within electoral politics, at least on a federal level. I think I see like local elections, and I tell my audience local elections are way more important because you can actually move. There's the big Wall Street money doesn't have as much time and effort to worry about local elections. So it's why you get people like Kashwama Sawant or Nithya Raman get in the city council in Los Angeles. She's an open socialist. She took the seat of a guy that was in the pockets of the big developers in LA. But I don't know, like, more movement happens in labor strikes. More shit gets changed in labor strikes than in any election, because that's the only thing where we have any powers. If we stop, we hurt the ruling elite's pocket. We shut it down. And everybody was like boycotting Kellogg's, and that was a trend on social media. Don't buy Kellogg's. I'm sure they saw their numbers go down. I'm sure they saw their stock go down. And they're tracking social media. So I don't know. I guess I agree that, like, it's definitely a thing to reach out to people that don't agree with you and go into the middle of the country and reach out to these people and do it from labor. It's the thing I like with the People's Party is they're trying to reach out. I hope they're not just reaching out with, disenfranchised Bernie supporters, but, so yeah, I don't know how this happens out within the electoral system. I just don't see it. I mean, and you have an amazing amount of optimism, JB. You have chosen the toughest. You've literally chosen to just not get a lot of big wins and to look for the little wins. And I applaud you for, I've seen it as your friend, your resolve.
Imagine, Graham, if you lived in 1876, okay? And, we just fought a civil war. We're going through Reconstruction. We're going to enfranchise, at least at first, African-American males. There's some environment in the country, not just for stopping the war and going back to business as usual, but actually reconstructing America. And then that gets, with a stroke of a pen and a deal between the Democrats and the Republicans, that gets destroyed. And Jim Crow rules the South for 100 years until people are able to do that. I mean, the level of betrayal and utter anti-humanness that is part of our history in America is very real. And people back in the 19 teens, when people were being lynched, and, you know, they kind of said, well, we don't know what, I mean, how would you look at that situation and say, oh yeah, we know what we're going to do to get rid of this? I mean, like a level of racism that is just soaked into the very core of the country, not just the South, but why wouldn't you just give up and just be like, this country is beyond any modicum of redemption for what it's done? But people move forward and things transform. I don't know exactly how they transform. I don't know when the moment's going to be that the two-party system kind of cracks and falls apart. I guarantee you it'll be messy. It won't look like what we think it will. It won't look like the Berlin Wall coming down, you know. But I'm optimistic that, and I get this from being an organizer. I talk to people all over the country. I talk to conservatives. I talk to progressives. I talk to people that have given up on electoral politics, like my friend Graham Elwood. I talk to all kinds of people. And the spirit of this country, of the ordinary people, to keep moving forward is there. It's real. Now, how do you put that all together? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of interesting conversations taking place in Black Lives Matter, what Andrew Yang is doing, what you're on TikTok right now. The guy who invented the tech for TikTok, Farhad Mohi, he just gave up on tech and business, and he started something called the Good Party to empower, using digital tools to empower independents that want to run for office. It might fail, might go nowhere. But I love that people are like, we got to do something about this. This is killing our country. It's preventing any kind of innovation. Might that come together at some point? In a way, in the next 5 years, 10 years? Sure, it's possible.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with John Updike, president of Open Primaries.
And leftists should stop talking to each other.
Leftists should stop talking to each other and reach out to others.
Yeah, and have real conversations, you know.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We are still in our 9th month of demonetization from YouTube. So support what we're doing at patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. It's free to sign up, and there's a premium level at $10 a month. And for that, you get everybody on the platform's premium content. Myself, Lee Camp, Ron Placone, Jimmy Dore, Whitney Webb, Kim Iverson, Abby Martin, and many, many others. You can also support what we're doing at Venmo at Graham-Elwood and go to GrahamElwood.com. We have a PayPal button and a PO box. I also have crypto wallets, which are all in the show notes. Thanks for supporting what we do.